Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. We are here in mid-September, specifically the 22nd night of September is when we're recording this, not to be confused with the 21st night of September.
Do you remember?
From the Earth, Wind, and Fire song. But it's September. We got a lot of big news this week. We had a PS5 Showcase last week. We had the big Microsoft and Bethesda news, and we got our first peek at Wandavision. I guess first extended peek. I'm sure we got some tiny snippet of it before, but this was the first time we got a real look at what the show is going to be, or at least what we can discern it will be. So lots to talk about. We are going to kind of drive by. I mean, we tend to talk, I don't know, we talk about the Oscars on this show. I know that. I don't know how much we talk about the Emmys, but the Emmys also happened. I will admit I did not watch. I don't know about you guys, but I know you guys are fans of Schitt's Creek, which essentially cleaned up.
Yeah, we are big fans of Schitt's Creek. We didn't watch the Emmys either, but I basically just did a recap, like I do with a lot of award shows nowadays. I just do like the day after recap of everything, and was very happy to see that Schitt's Creek basically swept the Emmys, and I think it was well-deserved. If you guys have seen the show, then I think most people will agree there's just something very unique and special about it, and it was one of my sleeper hits. We started binging it early on in quarantine, and it was one of my sleeper hits that I absolutely fell in love with the show. That's
awake at this point, I would say. My girlfriend's really into Schitt's Creek. I've never watched it, but I've walked by. I'll tell you, I've never watched this show, but I know who my favorite character is.
Is it David?
And it's the mom, and specifically is her name Moira?
Moira Rose.
Moira. She's specifically my favorite character when she's talking about bebés. That's my favorite Schitt's Creek thing. I realize I've done something interesting here, something that's I think never before been done on the podcast. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't introduce you guys. I just kind of hopped in on it. So I'll take a second now. I'm Illeagle 86, one of your hosts. And we have Nerdbomber and Techtic here. You've heard from Nerdbomber, and Techtic, I think, chimed in there at one point. Give everyone a howdy ho, Ranger Joe over there.
Howdy ho, Ranger Joe.
Yeah, Techtic once again can't follow instructions. Yeah, we're all here. We're still here. For those who have been listening for a long time, it's the same three here to talk about not just Schitt's Creek, but about the news topics I mentioned. And we have a very special quiz topic for later. I want to thank our Patreon subscribers. One of the most interesting quiz topics I think we've ever had on this show is coming up. We'll get into that. We'll get into the choices that we gave you and what you ultimately picked and why I don't really understand it, but we'll get there. First, we need to talk about Microsoft and Bethesda. So this is a big deal. For those who have not heard, I doubt we're breaking this to anyone who listens to the podcast because I think most of our listeners are gamers. Microsoft has purchased Bethesda. Specifically, they've purchased Bethesda for $7.5 billion. I believe this broke on Monday. And Nerdbomber took some show notes here with some perspective. Disney bought Star Wars for $4 billion and also bought Marvel for $4 billion. But Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion. And Sony bought Insomniac. That's probably the most closely related example for $229 million. So $7.5 billion. That's a lot of smackers.
Yeah, I mean those numbers to me, like one of the things that I instantly think of is together Marvel and Star Wars is worth $8 billion. So basically with this purchase, Bethesda is evaluated to be kind of equal what both Marvel and Star Wars was worth. It's very interesting when you think about it in that context.
This is a testament, I would argue the latest testament, because there have been many before it, of just how big a deal the video game industry is becoming, money-wise, how lucrative it is. I mean, when you talk about the resources that go into games, like I know, this might have been the Nerdbomber podcast way back. We talked about Red Dead Redemption 2 and like how much money was poured into it. Rockstar, I think typically a lot of the conversations of this nature surround Rockstar of like just how many resources go into this, how big of a deal it is financially, how much money Grand Theft Auto 5 has made. Like it's incalculable. And similarly, Skyrim, I guess in this case is probably the better example to mention. Obviously Bethesda has control of a number of big RPGs, Fallout and the Elder Scrolls franchise as a whole. I have to think that with the next console generation coming up, Microsoft paid for the rights to those games, assuming that they were going to be extremely valuable, and I my gut, it's a lot of money, I understand, but my gut says it's going to pay off for them. When you think about Skyrim and just how, it sounds bad to say that it's a franchise that's been milked for years, but like it is, right? Like to me it's a step below Grand Theft Auto 5 of like it's been this thing that's, Skyrim came out on this thing. Skyrim came out on this thing next. Have they developed a new Elder Scrolls game? No, but here's Skyrim in another version that you can have. Like, it's just a very...
Well, I mean, when the publisher is actively making a joke in an E3 panel about your game getting republished on an Amazon Echo device, like,
right.
It just goes to show this game alone has racked up so much money.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Let's talk about what exactly this means as far as, are you Team Sony or Team Microsoft with regards to the new console purchase?
I mean, this definitely gave me pause. So from a strategic standpoint, this was a very smart move because Xbox announced this on Monday and pre-orders for the new console went live on Tuesday. And as someone who was very much in the camp of, I'm going to buy a PlayStation 5 and then hold off on Xbox until later notice, this kind of gave me pause. And I really struggled today, the day that we're recording, to not pre-order the Xbox Series X. Because for me, Bethesda is more than just Skyrim. You look at their portfolio, they have Arcane, they have I'm blanking on the actual developers' names, but they have Doom, they have
Wolfenstein, Fallout.
Yeah, I mean,
I got your back.
Thank you. Well, it's just so many titles that I've enjoyed. I mean, Arcane alone, I think if it had just been Arcane was purchased and is now going to be under the Microsoft fold, I think that alone would have given me pause because Dishonored and Deathloop looks amazing. A lot of Arcane's games are some of my favorite titles, and Arcane alone is enough to make me excited. This is very interesting, and I know they've already clarified that they will honor any exclusivity deals that they have in place. So like Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop, they're going to honor the exclusivity deals that they already have for the PlayStation 5. But it's unclear whether the games will be exclusive to Xbox moving forward. But if you have all of these big titles, you have your Dooms, your Wolfensteins, your Fallouts, your next Elder Scrolls games, all under the Microsoft umbrella, or at the very least coming day one to Game Pass without you having to shell out more money, that's suddenly a big feather in Microsoft's cap that they didn't have before. And that's massive.
What else is interesting, too, to consider about those exclusive titles is if any sequels are made, it's going to be now Microsoft exclusive. So now it'll be incentive to jump back over to the Microsoft train if you had started that on PlayStation.
So, okay, that's... I was about to provide a counterpoint to Nerdbomber, but you made a pretty good point, Techtic, I think, in terms of sequels, because for me, and I'm aware that I'm a very unique case here. Like, when you talk about Fallout, when you talk about Elder Scrolls, you're talking about two franchises that are a huge deal that I could care less about. I'm not an RPG player. So
Shame.
When you talk about those as the big things, you know, I'm fine with losing those because I never really had them. And then like Deathloop, I was worried until it was learned that Deathloop was going to remain a PS5 exclusive. And I think Deathloop looks really cool. I mean, Techtic, you make a good point that if there's a sequel to that, it's going to be hard to watch that come out somewhere else. But
which, in what world does Bethesda not do sequels?
Well, so another thing you have to think about too. I was talking to someone else about this today, and I'm not so sure. It's maybe for Deathloop, there's a case to be made, but in terms of Fallout and in terms of Skyrim, I'm not entirely sure that Microsoft takes those exclusive and risks losing half of their client base. I think we are departing the age, and I could be wrong, but from a financial standpoint, I think we may be departing the age where you can convince someone to put down $500 to buy something just because you have exclusive rights to a certain game when there are however many games available.
So I agree with you that they wouldn't take away from the existing market that is, say, these Skyrim franchise type games. However, with the new titles that are coming out, it now gives them leverage in the future to take it away if they so choose.
Yeah, I know they said that they were going to address it on a title-by-title basis. And it's really interesting to think about. I think right now in my head, there's like an 80-20 split. I think one of the big things that Xbox got obliterated with the last generation was having console exclusives. And we saw with the PlayStation 4, good games sell systems. And I have this feeling that if we had heard, or even when we go back and look at the Insomniac acquisition, nobody was like, oh, well, you know, Insomniac made Sunset Overdrive, so Sony's going to have to honor and try to make games, like if that ever had a sequel, they have to make sure that that's going to be on the Xbox. Nobody really said that. And I think it's only because so many people are on the PlayStation install base right now that people are like, oh, well, they couldn't possibly think about not putting that on my console. But honestly, they might. On the other hand, if they do make it open to everybody, there's still more incentive to buy into the Xbox ecosystem. Because if you have that game now, you're getting it free on Game Pass day one. You look at what the price line has been on some of these next-gen games. I mean, it's $69.99 now. They're no longer $59.99 titles. They are even more expensive than they were before. So if you're thinking about like, oh, what's the best bang for my buck? I get to play all of these great games for free with the Xbox, especially when you're looking at all access. Man, it just seems like a really great deal to me. And I don't know why then I would want to buy those games on PlayStation when I'm getting them essentially free on Xbox with my subscription.
Well, there's a couple of things you have to remember. PlayStation has console exclusives of its own, and $500. Like I think things have changed. I think when the Xbox One came out, I think you're right that PlayStation won because it had better games. However, I just don't. I have such a hard time seeing Xbox say we're not going to sell PlayStation users Skyrim. I mean, how much did Skyrim alone make?
Well, I mean, they're not going to yank old titles away, but new installments.
No, I'm not talking about old titles, but I'm saying using Skyrim as a benchmark for what a new title, for what a new Elder Scrolls could be, and for how many copies it could sell. So they're just never going to want to cut that in half.
In my opinion,
it's so much money.
Nobody said that when PlayStation came out with Marvel Spider-Man at the literal peak of Marvel hype. Nobody.
But it wasn't a franchise. It wasn't a franchise. Marvel Spider-Man was a surprise relative to Skyrim.
See, but you got to look at it like this. At the end of the day, even if they didn't have any exclusive content, they now are offering free with Game Pass, whereas you'll have to pay full release price of the disc. And that's a huge move.
And you're saying $500, but we also have to remember they have this $299 all digital box. And a lot of people are buying into that. I personally am not. And I know basically nobody on this podcast that likes the idea of a non-disc drive console. But a lot of people are doing that and they don't care.
How much is Game Pass a month again? Refresh my memory.
$15
a month.
So for $15 a month, you're basically, I mean, you look at all of the different studios now that Xbox has under their moniker. I mean, if you like Western RPGs, you have Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Avowed, Outer Worlds, Fable, Wasteland. That's just to name a few. And you're getting all of that for $15 a month, and there's going to be a drip feed of content. So instead of paying a $70 one-time fee, you're paying $15 a month and getting all of these games for free. I just think if you don't like those games, it's not going to move the needle for you. Yeah. But if you do, like if you like Doom, if you liked Prey, if you like Dishonored, like those are the things that really draw me in more than your Elder Scrolls. Now that I'm getting older and just don't have time for the sweeping RPGs, those games, they sell me.
So at this point, I will safely say that Xbox has definitely made the pot much, much sweeter between the no disk drive being cheaper, the power of the unit being better, the available content being more readily available. And so it really comes down to Ratchet and Clank.
That's the thing. I mean, they're going different ways, clearly, right? And I do wonder to what extent this is, and granted, it's a much splashier move than Sony buying Insomniac, but Sony buying Insomniac probably had the same motives, right? Of these guys are making great games for us and they're making them exclusively. We want to make sure we keep it that way. And I think that was the whole methodology behind that. But Sony is going for a much more traditional thing than Xbox is. And I don't know, maybe I'm a traditionalist. I don't know. I can definitely see the value in, like you said, the pot's been sweetened. I can see the value in what Xbox is doing. But I think this should transition us to what we're going to talk about next, which is the PS5 Showcase. And I'm sorry, it was miles better than anything Xbox has shown us. It's not even close to me. And we can dive into this.
So hold on. I just want to say though.
Yeah.
So you're saying that everything that was shown was miles better. And that goes back to a lot of the games that were shown weren't exclusives. But the ones that really kind of blew you away were the exclusives. And that's what's selling you on the PlayStation.
You said it was miles better. Would you say it was Miles Morales better?
But they're not exclusives from a studio that Sony bought. Like I don't know. I see it as different things. I think.
But I mean, Sony bought Insomniac, and that Spider-Man is an exclusive, and Insomniac did make a game for the Xbox that they can no longer make again.
But the Insomniac sale happened after Spider-Man was done, I have to think. I mean, I'm splitting hairs at this point, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is I also kind of worry on behalf of Xbox fans. If Xbox bought this company, how inclined is this company to... Isn't there supposed to be an incentive for console makers to go out and seek games to make exclusives? So developers want to make really good games, so console makers go out and say, we want this as an exclusive, and there's potentially some kind of bonus to that, right? Whereas if it's all under one umbrella, I worry a little bit about the quality too. I don't know.
I don't necessarily agree, because you look at some of the games that are basically console sellers for Sony, and they're Sony-owned developers. I mean, you look at Horizon Zero Dawn, you look at God of War, those are all in-house titles. Mm-hmm. I think, and you look at the cash in hand that Microsoft has, and they have some of the biggest cash flow out of any company. So I don't know if they're going to buy Bethesda just to cut them at the knees. I feel like they need games. Honestly, they need games. That said, I agree with you that the PlayStation conference did look great.
I don't like... Again, I feel like everyone's going to think I'm just anti-Microsoft, and that's not what it is. I'm anti-monopoly. And I do mean the board game, because I'm not a big fan of the board game either. But I just mean, like, when this much money is being thrown around, like, it's my opinion, outside of The Mandalorian, that Disney buying Star Wars has not gone great.
So now that we've waxed poetic, Nerdbomber and I, about how well Xbox did, I just want to tell you folks out there a little story about the Sony showcase and the preceding moments that I lived afterwards. So prior to the showcase, we had both decided we're going to wait and buy consoles later on, and we're going to just put that money aside. After the showcase, Nerdbomber was a woman possessed, and on every subreddit, every single website, and after all was said and done, we now have a PlayStation pre-ordered. So it did do very, very well. Well enough for us to make the decision to pre-order it.
I feel like we took a gap in what Illeagle was saying. And just to circle back, I do agree with you.
I think I had mostly finished my thought, but yeah.
I think exclusivity is honestly bad for all gamers. Like, in an ideal world, all games would be available everywhere. And it hurts. Honestly, it hurts. As someone, for me, I'm planning on buying both consoles, so I don't care. I'm just excited that maybe there's more competition, which might drive better games. But for someone who is only planning on getting one console, it sucks getting kept out of a good game, especially if it's a franchise that's established that you already love. Regardless of whether it's a Sony exclusive or an Xbox exclusive, it kind of sucks. There.
And you just said it's going to drive better games, but that's the thing that I don't know is true. Part of me thinks that Bethesda's going to say, okay, now we have our client base because Microsoft's going to back us up, and Xbox folks are going to buy this because they're the only ones that can, so we can make whatever we want. And that's an issue for me. But it's also just everything being under one umbrella that scares me a little bit. We can move on, and yeah, I mean, we can get into it on Twitter too. But this showcase, I mean, Final Fantasy 16, Spider-Man, of course, God of War Ragnarok was teased. This Hogwarts game, which granted not an exclusive, but holy
looks
crap,
fantastic.
That was a big reveal. Resident Evil Village, more footage on that. Blops Cold War, more footage on that. The Demon's Soul remake, not a thing for me, but I think that excited a lot of people. So that was another one. We got a little bit more Deathloop footage, more of an in-depth look at what it's going to entail, the kind of decision-making paradigms that go along with the gameplay. And of course, there was the reveal of the prices as well, which less splashy than Microsoft in that there's no ultra cheap option, but it's pretty much what everyone expected: $4.99 for the disc drive version and $3.99 for the digital. So we can get into this a little bit. We can kind of get into specifics. Spider-Man for us, if you've listened to this podcast before, you know that we are big fans of the Spider-Man game. And the Miles Morales teaser was phenomenal. I think it did a great job reminding people who played the first one just how good it was. And the core gameplay mechanics are still there. But there was a lot of different stuff too. I mean, we saw some completely new moves. And I mean, that's what pushed me closest to pre-ordering. I'm not going to pre-order. I don't even know when I'm going to get the console. But if I were to get the console, it would be, I don't want to say exclusively for Spider-Man, but that's a big sell for me. Yeah. That was my personal highlight. I think it was pretty much all of our personal highlights, but I don't know what other high points in that trailer either of you wanted to touch on.
I mean, obviously that was the thing. After I watched that trailer, I was just like, okay, I'm going to pre-order. This is a thing. I want to play this as soon as this game comes out. Not knowing, of course, this came out in tweets after the showcase was over that the game would come to the PlayStation 4 as well. But at that point, you know, when I found out that it was coming to PS4, I was already sold and I was already like in motion. I'm like, I'm going to get this massive chunky PlayStation 5. I'm going to find a place for it and I'm going to play Spider-Man with ultra fast speeds and no loading screens. And this is just what I'm going to do.
Your fast travel, there's going to be no subway screens. Your fast travel time is going to be...
that.
If you want, I could put a paper towel over the fan to try to slow it down.
No,
so
I
you can
think
travel the subway.
Right.
I think Hogwarts Legacy was incredible. I know there's been a lot of bad stuff kind of surrounding J.K. Rowling and
bad press, to say the least.
Very bad press. But I do know after the trailer was revealed, and this is something that had been leaked. I know the idea of a Harry Potter RPG had been leaked a while back, but this is the first time we saw anything kind of like cohesive and put together. And I think WB Interactive said that J.K. Rowling, aside from whatever licensing deals she may have with WB, had no part in this game. And I understand
they want to get distance from her as much as possible. And
right.
She's still, make no mistake, she's still making a gang of money on this. You know, if you are the kind of person who is really, you know, anti-JK, which is totally understandable at this point, I might add, she's getting your money if you buy this game. But it looks amazing.
It really does. Like, this looks like everything that childhood Nerdbomber wanted and dreamed about. Like, all of the Harry Potter games that came out for, like, the PlayStation 2, they were fun, but, like, you relived the books and the movies, and you didn't really get a chance to have your own story in that world, and that's really all I wanted. And the combat looked great. You got to ride a freaking hippogriff in the trailer. Like, I'm so sold, and I am sad that part of my money will be going to JK, but also I have to also remind myself and others that there are a lot of people who worked really hard on this game who aren't named JK Rowling, and just because she's a giant doofus head on the internet doesn't mean that all of those people don't deserve support. So like I'm hedging a little bit to try to make it okay that I really, really want this game, because I really, really want this game.
I just want to know how the sorting hat works. Is it like a real in-depth personality quiz? Is it you just pick what class you want and then they ingrain it into the story?
It'll be a Pottermore-esque thing, I would imagine. Did you guys take the Pottermore quiz?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, weren't you guys Ravenclaw and I was Gryffindor?
I want to say we were both Ravenclaw.
Yep.
Yeah, we might have done this on the podcast or previous podcast.
I remember thinking I'm much cooler than both of you guys.
Well, that's not true, but okay. Hogwarts, I mean, this is an idea. We talked about this when because I think Avalanche leaked footage of this. We definitely talked about this on a podcast a while back. And I think at the time what we said, which is still true now, is this is something that should have happened so long ago. It's a no-brainer, you know, in terms of open world gaming, a landscape for that, you know, being at Hogwarts and being potentially beyond Hogwarts as a wizard, you know, living out your own adventures, not just the book's adventures, is, I don't want to say it's an easy thing to create, but the world is so expansive and there's so much that you can do to make a great game that, yeah, this is going to be a big one. Again, this is not an exclusive, at least as far as I could tell. Has it been announced either way? I think it's going to be across
it's going to be
consoles.
open for all consoles.
Yeah, it'll be a big seller without a doubt whenever it comes out, but I'm excited for that for sure. I am not a Final Fantasy person. I've never played a single Final Fantasy game, but they're on the 16th one, I assume is what that means. FF16. So I don't know if either of you have experience with, this was a big deal, but this was lost on me, I guess is what I'll say.
I mean, I thought it looked great. I've never actually played any of the mainline Final Fantasy games. I've dipped my toes in from afar with Kingdom Hearts, but that's about as far in as I got. I keep meaning to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I just haven't gotten around to it because I feel like there's just so many games all the time, and that one was like an 80-hour journey that I wasn't willing to take in the middle of the summer. But there are just so many, like, it just looked incredible. If you like that kind of game, which I do, like, I liked Kingdom Hearts, which is a little bit more basic, but like I thought it looked really cool. I don't know, I'm at a point now, and if there's any listener out there who can help like clue me in, there are so many different Final Fantasy games and I don't know what's a good jumping off point. I don't know if I can jump in to Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasy 7. Like,
Seven's a good jumping off point.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you played them, Techtic?
Yeah, I played them all the time with a friend of mine as a kid.
So Were you
I did not
excited
know
about
that.
this? I had no idea that you actually played these games. This is news.
Yeah, I was excited about it. I feel like I'm always saying that every game looks exciting and every game looks fun, but that's the thing about my genre is it doesn't really exist. I can go from a side scroller to an RPG to a puzzle game all in the same day and enjoy each and every one.
Well, then let's talk about Demon's Soul, the remake, because
Never mind, that one looks way too hard.
I have not played Demon's Soul. Yeah, that clearly has ties to, unless I'm mistaken, has ties to like the Bloodborns and the Dark Souls kind of games. To say that it looked hard, I mean, it looked extremely repetitive. They gave kind of this extended playthrough, I guess, of watching someone play the game. I have to say, and I'm gonna make people mad, I know that, I got a little bored watching this one.
No, same though.
It's not bored, it's strategic. You have to be very careful because then you just restart and it's frustrating and I don't have the patience.
Well, I understand
doing the
what
same
you were
two
saying.
sword swings.
Yeah, it was like walk 10 feet, swing a sword and dodge.
Well, but then every now and then there's like a crossbow guy that you got to be ready for, and then that's kind of the trick of the maps is they make you get comfortable and then they catch you off guard.
Well, and then they got to the big boss at the end, and I was like, all right, that'd probably be pretty hard and pretty interesting. But up until now, I've seen him kill a lot of like armless zombies in 2 strikes, and then okay, walk another 20 feet, go down a ladder, kill another armless zombie, keep going. It's just like I can imagine that kind of monotony being pleasing, but to me, and at the time, surrounded by what it was surrounded by, I was like, again, I think a lot of it too is I know people are really hyped for this, and I didn't. That's another one that's lost on me.
Yeah, it didn't resonate with me at all. Which is sad because it's supposed to be a launch title for the PlayStation 5, and I was kind of holding out hope. I was like, maybe this will have something in this trailer that will spark something in me that makes me want to play it, but nothing.
Well, so Deathloop for me, outside of Spider-Man, was the other high point, and that's it's just doubling down on what I think is going to make it so cool. You know, it's not just I almost said BioShock. It's not just a Dishonored-y combat game where you have these powers, and it's first of all, it looks a lot more shooter heavy than Dishonored ever was, and it seems to be inheriting some of Dishonored's tendencies in that it looks like there's some decision making you have to do. I mean, this playthrough that they showed kind of walked through, okay, you can go kill this guy individually, but then you won't have time to go kill this guy, and you want to get him in the same place at the same time. So how do you do that? You ruin this guy's scientific experiment. It's kind of going into, and you learn this over, I guess, multiple deaths, right? You try and you fail and you try and you fail, and it's this iterative process, and that's appealing to me from a gameplay perspective. Not to mention the visuals look good, the combat looked really fun. So this one's a win for me for sure.
I would agree. It looks really good. Like I feel like this is now like the 3rd or 4th time we've seen Deathloop footage, and every time I'm just like, I am going to buy this game when it comes out because it looks dope.
I'm just curious if it actually is a puzzle or if like there's intended deaths and then it goes, okay, now you can progress. This is what you need to do. Do you know what I mean?
I really doubt it.
I feel like it'll be a little column A and column B. Like, I don't think they'll have you flounder over and over and over again. I'm sure they'll give you like hints or something eventually, because I could see how frustrating it would get if you would just die over and over and over and over and you can never achieve the goal that you need to do. You know what I mean? But I think it'll leave it a lot to your imagination.
And I think Dishonored kind of struck a nice balance there. And granted, the choices in Dishonored are a lot more binary. It's basically you can kill someone and go violent and go, bull in a china shop, or you can go sneaky and you can kind of do things in a more finessed way. And they obviously gave you the choice, and there were certain ways you could screw it up, but they definitely gave you some leeway to, okay, if you want to go this way, we'll help you figure it out a little bit. It might not be easiest, but it might reward you. I imagine Deathloop might have a lot of that same thing going on where, this playthrough framed it as, okay, you can't, you have to get these 2 guys in the same room to kill them, otherwise it's not possible. Well, it might not be that way. It might just be, you can take this potential route of killing them both separately, and you're going to have to do this hard thing in between, or you can get them both together and it'll make your life easier. Stuff like that where you can never go one way and it's impossible. It's just, again, there's some flexibility and fluidity in the story as a result of choices that you make. So I'm excited about that one. We should move on to the break, but before we do, we should mention the PS Plus collection, which is, this is a place where I can give Sony no credit. This is the most anemic attempt to combat Game Pass that I've ever seen. Is that like, that was the one part of this showcase that felt frankly silly, in my opinion.
Yeah, it felt kind of disappointing.
Clearly just them trying to answer for it and coming up with, for very few games I haven't played, I think Days Gone was the only one that I was like, I haven't played this and I want to. Otherwise, it was a lot of games that I played that were admittedly very good, but they're old news, like the definition of old news. So it didn't strike me, and it was where it was their finisher before announcing the console titles, which was a strange thing.
The thing that kind of got me on this too, so like I've been a PS Plus subscriber for 3-4 years, ever since we got the PlayStation 4 for the first time, and these are all titles that I've already got in my collection because they were already on PlayStation Plus. Like, it wasn't like it was a big deal where a bunch of new games were coming. I think Days Gone and maybe like 1 or 2 other titles hadn't already been on PlayStation Plus as a free game. But everything else, like, I already had for free, so it wasn't like it was this huge perk. If you're new to the ecosystem, sure, then it's nice to have, especially with them announcing the God of War sequel. Like, it is nice to have the ability, if you hadn't played that before, to get that basically free with your PS Plus subscription. But yeah, as you said, a very anemic attempt at matching Game Pass.
Well, and it also concerns me a lot because backwards compatibility is something at this point I feel like hasn't been talked about a lot, and I'm concerned about it because now they're saying, well, you'll be able to play these PS4 games on your PS5. It's like, okay, but wasn't I supposed to be able to play a lot of PS4 games on the PS5? Like, it's almost like they're setting you up to say, well, you have these PS4 games, go play these and be happy with that.
Yeah, I know they were saying 99% of all PlayStation 4 games should be able to work on the PlayStation 5. But yeah, I didn't think about that, but that is kind of concerning.
Yeah, granted they're tiny alarm bells, but there are some alarm bells going off with that in mind. So that's our brief summary of the PS5 showcase. We're going to go to the break now, but before we do, I want to encourage anyone who's listening to shout out to us on our Twitter accounts at OWLeagle86, at OW Nerdbomber, at OW Techtic, and our main show account at Online Warriors 1. Talk at us about the PS5 showcase, titles you liked, titles you didn't like. Tell me I'm wrong about Demon Souls. Talk to us about the Bethesda sale and why I'm wrong about that too. Basically, just come on there to tell me I'm wrong, and I imagine there will be no shortage of people doing so. But we want to hear from you, so hit us up there. Aside from that, before we go to the break, I also want to shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Ben Checkness. Ben, here's to you, man. It's been many episodes of saying your name. I think I'm getting pretty good at it by now, but let me know, I guess. Ben's been supporting us on the show here for quite a while now. We're very grateful to him and anyone else who's supported us on Patreon over the years, but him especially, our most stalwart supporter. And he supports us at the night level on Patreon, which gives him access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, in addition to getting him a producer shout out every episode, like this one, input into our weekly game segment, which, as we mentioned, is about, well, did I say what it's about? I don't want to spoil it. I'll leave that for later. He also gets the occasional guest segment, which he's done, again, quite a few times now. So Ben's super cool. You want to be like him. You want to be a knight, and we would super appreciate that. There's also a Squire level, which gets you monthly secret segment and vlog access, and the page, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. So for more details on that, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast for more of the details. Thanks again to Ben. We will be right back to talk about WandaVision.
Being a nerd as an adult can be difficult. Life gets a little busy to constantly be staying up to date with nerd culture.
Let's see, there's work,
Life,
bills,
stress,
relationships,
kids.
So you wish you could just turn something on during your hectic life that would keep you up to date at the push of a button.
Look no farther than the 30 and Nerdy podcast. I'm Josh.
And I'm Tyler. Here on the 30 and Nerdy podcast, we enlighten, educate, and entertain with all things nerd.
We discuss, debate, and break it down on what's going on in nerd culture from the past, present, and future. And you know the cool part?
We're 30, so we bring it to you in a less hectic way and easily accessible through your favorite podcast platform. But no worries, you don't have to be 30 to enjoy the show.
So relax and keep up to date with us as we bring you nerd news you need to know, but don't have time to go searching for it.
So come nerd out with us at the 30 and Nerdy podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you cast your pod. Cheers to you, nerds.
Okay, back to talk about WandaVision. Now, WandaVision is one of those shows that Disney and Marvel are making exclusively for Disney+. It is, as you can tell from the title, going to feature Scarlet Witch and Vision heavily, who, as you may know from the series of MCU movies, have a romantic relationship, which is pretty interesting. this is one of, I would say, one of two big Marvel shows. I mean, there's this and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We haven't heard much about Falcon and the Winter Soldier at all, really. And I'm sure we won't for a while yet, because I think production on that one's been delayed. But WandaVision looks like something else, man. They're tapping into... So if you haven't watched the trailer yet, you can go watch it before... Press pause on us and go watch the trailer, because we're going to be getting pretty into it. But you have this fantastical housewife, like 1950s kind of situation. Almost like Nuketown. Yeah, or I said Nuketown, but that's like the opposite of Pleasantville. But yeah, you know, an idyllic 1950s post-war America where the wife is at home, you know, not having any rights and cleaning and cooking. And the Vision, who still looks like Vision, by the way, for a lot of it, is just kind of like, I don't know, being a guy in the 50s. So there's a lot of questions. A, why are they in the 50s? A, why are they... It's almost like they're trapped in a sitcom. I don't know. We see things happen in this trailer, but we don't understand them, I guess is my prevailing sentiment. There's a 1950s motif. We exit that for someone to tell Vision that he's dead, which we, as the viewer, kind of know already, if you've seen the MCU movies. So I think it could get pretty deep. And honestly, that concerns me, if anything. But I mean, first blush thoughts, Nerdbomber and Techtic. I mean, Techtic, I know you're the comic guy, so we'll get to you. But Nerdbomber, walk us through it, your reaction to this.
Initially I got vibes of like I Love Lucy or I Dream of Jeannie or something like that. And then, as you said, then it got into like colored vision of quote unquote the real world or something. I don't know exactly what was happening. It was almost like they were trapped in a bubble, or like some kind of weird government research thing, and then they escaped the bubble. And I honestly, I don't know. I'm sure
but
they're probably he is dead. Right. So maybe it's like a mind game, mental experiment on Scarlet Witch. I feel like if I knew more about the comics, there's probably some cues or something in the trailer that I'm missing super hardcore that would help tip me off.
So I have a theory, but I want to let Techtic talk for a bit, and then I'll say what my theory is and see if he has the same theory, maybe.
So for me, I thought it drew strong parallels from something called House of M, where basically Scarlet Witch has slipped into madness, and you see a lot of her familial characters come back into that, and that's what I think I'm most excited for, and what I think is going to be these big plot points in the show. I think Quicksilver is going to come back because obviously in her mind he'll live on forever. So it'll be exciting to see him. And the other thing that I think is going to be a big plot point, which was a huge part of the House of M comics, is Magneto is going to show up. So for those of you who don't know, Magneto is actually the father of Quicksilver. Well, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, but I think the verdict's out there for Quicksilver. But
right.
All in all, he's their father, and to have him show up really kind of opens the scope of what other X-Men are we going to see. Is there going to be some of the mutant plots that occurred in that comic, and how expansive is this universe going to be? So I'm really excited to see what more pops up as the series continues.
Because I do have to just quickly say, she is going to be in the next Doctor Strange. What is it, a movie, TV show? I don't know.
Movie.
Okay, yeah. She's going to be in the next Doctor Strange movie. So whatever this TV show is, it has to be like a self-contained thing. So Techtic, you're guessing that it'll follow this House of M storyline that's like basically an alternate reality that she's making in her head.
All up in there.
Illeagle, what is your theory?
Well, so incidentally, Doctor Strange 2 is called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So there could be some ties there. I mean, you just mentioned this House of M storyline, which I, to be clear, know nothing about, as Scarlet Witch losing her mind. Well, maybe she gets lost in the Multiverse of Madness. I mean, that's one theory. My theory, the first thing I thought, Vision's the source of all his powers, and, you know, the stone that's in his head is the Mind Stone. Am I right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's
the Mind Stone. No, that's the Mind Stone.
Now, the Mind Stone, if my comic knowledge, which is sparse, serves me, houses... Is it just called the Mind World? Or no, that's the Soul Stone. Shoot, the Soul World is in the Soul Stone. Okay, forget my entire theory. I was going to say they're stuck in the Mind Stone, but that would be the Soul Stone. They could be stuck in the Mind Stone. You can make stuff up now. It's comics. Anything can be anything. They're stuck in the Mind Stone, and it means anything can happen, so the show could be really interesting. I don't know. There's parts of it that are very eerie. You know, the part where they're at the dinner table, and that guy just starts asking questions about their past that they very much can't answer. Which, why can't they answer them? That's another question. Are they in hiding? Are they undercover? You know, they're living this suburban idyllic life.
Do they just not know?
Or do they not know? Exactly.
But why does he want to know so bad? Because that guy was very vehement. He wanted to know.
It seems like Vision doesn't know that he's dead. Again,
Could
Captain
also
Han shows
be
up
a Rick and Morty type thing. For those of you who are not familiar with what I'm talking about, there are these aliens that go into their head and give them these idealized situations where they make them feel comfortable and ask them questions and interrogate them to get useful information out. Could also be that, and that's why maybe he wanted to know. He was digging for information.
I just think it's treading so close to being about death in a way that Marvel has not done. And I think that's very interesting. Like, they talk about death in Black Panther a little bit, and the Black Panther himself goes to that savannah that's kind of like the purple sky and stuff, and talks to the kings of old and everything. But outside of that, I can't think of like what else happens in Marvel. These are comic book movies. They don't generally talk about death. They don't deal with death.
I mean, Tony Stark
dying. But that was such a big deal. Is because they don't
go,
that.
Mr. Stark. That was
so now,
that was
right? So, but now, what I'm saying is now they're potentially poised to dig into that even further, which I think could be very interesting. But it looks very strange. I can't remember if the trailer itself had a release date attached to it. I don't think it did. But again, this is coming to Disney Plus. December 2020 is when the first episode is scheduled for. Also get a glimpse of Scarlet Witch in the old costume, which I think that might be the first time we've seen that. Is that true?
Yeah, I haven't seen that anywhere else.
It's a very, very brief look at it, but it's there. So be on the lookout for that. So yeah, WandaVision. Check out the trailer, and we'll talk about it more soon when it comes out, I assume. Yeah, with that, we are wrapping up the news. We can move on to What Are You Up To Wednesday? And I think I'm going to start this week. I haven't started in a bit, so I'm going to kick things off. And I'm going to talk about Lovecraft Country. And I'm trying to remember if I talked about this last week, but still watching Lovecraft Country. I actually caught up now where we're doing an episode a week, so it's going to be a while that I'm watching this. But it's spooky, guys. It's spooky. It's it's gory in like a B-movie kind of way, but it also deals a lot with racial injustice in America. It takes place in the 1950s, and it's got pretty much all black cast. And they deal with that a lot. So it's an interesting mix of Lovecraft horror and I guess the real life horror of being an African American in 1950s America. I would advise checking that out if you're an HBO user. Been watching that. The other thing is I'm officially now starting to really dig into Everspace. I almost said Everspace, which is not real. Everspace Stellar Edition on the Nintendo Switch. I'm really, really enjoying this so far. It's a different game than I'm used to playing. It's a different game than I've ever played, I think. This is ship combat, but it's called a roguelike in space, which I don't really understand. I think that's a D&D term that I'm not super familiar with, but basically you have to get from sector 1 to I don't know how many sectors there are, sector 7. You basically are doing space jumps to certain points in space, and you're fighting enemies and gathering resources and trying to stay alive. And you're doing this and trying to get to sector 7, which is many, many levels away. And if you die, you go back to the beginning and you lose everything that you had, and you have money to spend to upgrade your pilot abilities and your ship abilities, but you don't keep any weapons you got, you don't keep any resources you got besides money. So it's just a very interesting way. Every death is important, but the game is also kind of designed where you're going to die. There's no way you're not going to die, so it takes the stress away in that sense. And I'm really enjoying it. If you're a ship combat person, it's a very unique look. The story is not really anything, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be zooming around in space. I mean, Asteroids didn't have a story, as far as I know. So far I'd recommend it, but I'll keep y'all updated. Techtic. My guy Techtic. What do you got for us?
So the biggest, most interesting news for this last week is we were looking for something to play together, and we ended up picking up The Division, which has been out for a very, very long time.
Yeah, you probably got that for like $5.
Yeah.
Well, it was free on Gold, but I had The Division, and I'd started playing it, and then I had no one to play it with at the time years ago, so then I just stopped.
The Division is a game that I love the idea of, but I don't know if the execution would be for me, especially since I often like solo play, and that game's literally not designed for that.
The biggest takeaway from one, the game's fun. The thing I hated most is that headshots don't work in it for whatever reason. You can hit them right in the head, no problem, and it doesn't take any damage. They just go, "Oh my gosh, someone's shooting at us."
The enemies are bullet sponges. It's a lot like Borderlands, I would say.
But even Borderlands took headshots. Like you would at least take damage.
it takes headshots, but they might not die. And then it's be like, ah.
No, they don't.
You're like,
the first shot, it doesn't initialize any like depleting of health until the first shot has already been fired. So
you're saying they
can't
have
to be engaged in combat.
Yeah, so you don't get any advantages for the first headshot. You might as well just shoot in the sky and go, okay, I'm here, guys.
Yeah, no element of surprise. That's it. That's interesting.
But other than that, the game's fun. The one thing that I challenge all of our listeners to do is to watch on YouTube the opening scene to the game. Especially in 2020, it is incredibly eerie. So go ahead and enjoy that.
This is the Black Friday, the virus that hits on Black Friday, right? This is scary stuff. I remember the trailer for this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things I'd actually forgotten that's what the game was about. And then we were watching the opening cutscene and I was like, oh, this is so timely. Maybe too timely.
Yeah.
Do we want to do this right now? And then after the cutscene, like you just kind of bomb around and shoot bad guys, so you can kind of forget about that. But
I'm not going to get into all the parallels, but there's a lot of parallels.
So is there a co-op story, or is it all taking place online? I mean, what's the deal here?
Yes and yes.
Yeah, so we have the two consoles. So I'm downstairs, Techtic is upstairs, but there is a story. Like there's a story thread that you're following. You're just doing the missions together. It's kind of like Destiny almost.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. Well, that sounds cool. Good luck with that. Anything to add, or are we going to swing it over to the Nerdbomber?
We can swing it over.
Swing it on over. Nerdbomber, what do you got for us?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is I bought the Upright Go, which is not a game or a book or a movie. It is a back posture corrector. And
oh gosh,
because I've been home so much, and like normally when I'm in the office at my day job, like I'm walking around a little bit more. Now for the most part, I'm glued to my computer, either in meetings or doing work with really no reason to walk around unless I'm getting a snack or saying hi to Techtic or something.
Hey.
And so my back has been like, I can just tell that I'm slouching all the time. So there was a sale on the Upright Go, which is this little device that you stick between your shoulder blades on your back. And it works. It's actually kind of neat. It works all based on like relative angles. So you set it like you stand with correct posture and you set like your basis line. And then based on the angle of the device on your back, it tells you if you're slouching and then vibrates. And so it tells you to start. There's like training versus tracking, and training, it vibrates every time that you start to slouch so that you straighten up. And it says, oh, start using our recommended times and start with like 8 minutes for the first day. And I'm like, 8 minutes. I can do better. I'm going to do this for an hour. So I'm like very upright posture for an hour. And oh my God, my back muscles must have like atrophied because I was in some serious pain last night. It was rough. So today I dialed it back to their recommended time of 15 minutes. But like I looked and it tells you when you have it off training mode and just in tracking mode, it tells you how much time you spend slouching. And it's kind of scary.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm already more conscious about my posture. So I think it's already starting to do its job. It's only been 2 days of me actively using it. But I do think about it a lot. And the fact that like my muscles hurt now when I'm slouching because I'm wearing this thing and like now my back muscles wanted to stay in that set position. It's a decent device. A little pricey for what it was. I think it normally sells for like 80, but I got it for 30. So like it wasn't that much money out of my pocket. So I figured it would be worth giving it a shot. But so far, so good.
It would have a field day with me. I'll tell you. You guys know I have terrible posture.
I mean, hey, might be something to think about getting.
I currently have what I think is tendonitis in one arm.
That
no
is
idea
not good,
how
my man.
or why. Yeah, and I don't really like. I work out, but like not that much. Not enough to get tendonitis, that's for sure. So I think I'm slowly wasting away over here as well. I mean, it's 2020, it's quarantine, but what more could you ask for? But anyways, you had more. You think you had more to say?
The one other thing is that I started playing Tell Me Why, which is the Don't Nod game that came out. It's an Xbox exclusive. It's on Game Pass. It's the episodic game. It's got 3 different chapters, and they showed it during a bunch of the Xbox showcases in the last like 6 months or so. And
Ain't nothing but a heartbreak, right? Ain't nothing but a mistake.
what?
Tell me why ain't nothing but a heartbreak. Yeah, come on.
I did not
Sing it
get
with
that,
me.
but I love it.
First thing I thought.
So
I'm sure that's not what it is, though. So go on.
it's a very, I mean, all of Don't Nod's games, like Life is Strange, kind of has dark elements. This also is a very dark game. I will say, I don't know if I like this as much as I like Life is Strange. The mystery has been very predictable so far. Like every time there's a twisty twist and like at the end of each chapter, because I'm 2 chapters in, so I'm almost done. But at the end of each chapter, there's like a twisty twist cutscene, and it's supposed to take you by surprise. And each time I've been like, okay, yeah, I called that like 20 minutes ago. And so twist-wise, I don't know if it's as striking as they want it to be, but the story is really interesting. The characters are really interesting. There's some mini games that I think I could do without. Like there's some busy work where you're literally in the storeroom of a store counting stock, and I'm just like, why is this necessary? Right. Like we could have cut out this 20 minutes that I'm counting stock in the back of the store. But for the most part, I think it's a pretty well done game. It's only 3 chapters, so it's not like a big commitment. And I would say give it a try. It touches on a lot of different social issues and a lot of familial issues, and it's a very emotional story. So it's been interesting.
And you can sing the Backstreet Boys.
I can't believe I didn't get that right away.
Benefit. Yeah, well, now you're welcome, because now I'm sure that's forever for you. Okay, so today for the quiz, thank you to our Patreon. You know, I win, and I get to host the quiz for the first time in how long? And what topic do y'all saddle me up with? It's mold, guys. We're talking about mold today.
I have to give the backstory on how this ended up. So for our patrons, every week we've had a few like write-in entries, but every week we give like 3 or 4 options, and our patrons vote in a poll. And so this week we had Scarlet Witch was an option, Bethesda was an option, and then I needed a third one. And something very jarring happened. So we were eating Jell-O pudding cups, and Techtic, it's like middle of the workday, and Techtic is like, "Hey, do you want some Jell-O pudding cup?" And I was like, "I definitely want some Jell-O pudding cup."
Yep.
So it's a very creamy, like extraordinarily creamy Jell-O pudding cup.
Thick.
And I'm eating, and all of a sudden it's just like there's a chunk, and I'm like, oh, this is not right. So I look down in the cup, and there is mold all over that bad boy, which means like,
oh yeah,
and mold propagates throughout. Like once you have mold on something, that those spores they spread, and so like we ate some mold, and I freaked out because I'm allergic to penicillin, and I know not all mold is penicillin, but like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my god, this is how I go eating a Jell-O pudding cup. So I'm like wiping my mouth out and gargling and everything like that. So I was like, what could the third quiz topic be? And I was like, you know what? I just was traumatized by some mold, so let's go with that.
I just want to give you guys a little backstory of our difference in personal character. So while she's sitting there listerizing and the whole 9,
you're still eating it.
I'm sitting there with my yogurt, and to the point where she felt it necessary to say, "Don't eat that. There's mold in it," a second time.
I mean, you're just sitting there. What does she expect? She might think you didn't hear her.
They were wildly expired pudding cups.
I guess I should be thanking you then, Nerdbomber, for the quiz topic of mold, but I've got 5 questions in front of me here and a potential bonus, so may the best mold knower win, I guess.
Mold is for the bold.
As Nerdbomber implied, there are many more different kinds of mold than just penicillin. How many different kinds of mold are there? That's our baseline question.
Like unique species or strains?
I don't know what the difference between the two things you just said is. Just answer the question.
Who goes first?
It's you. After that sassy remark, it's you.
I'm going to guess there are 437 different species of mold.
Dude, there is definitely more than that. There's probably like 1 million, but I'm going to hedge my bet a little bit and say 1,000.
Okay, so Nerdbomber gets it. I've actually seen 2 different numbers in my brief mold research, but either way, it's either over 10,000 or over 100,000. I've seen both numbers equally as often, so someone might have dropped a 0 somewhere, but either way, Nerdbomber takes it. 437? I mean, I guess the species strains thing really screwed you up, but...
I don't even know if there are strains.
I think there are.
I don't know what it goes by. Does it go by strain or species?
I think it goes by strain. It's a fungi. It's not a... I think species is only for animals, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not a scientist. Actually, I am a scientist, but I'm not a zoologist. How much does the U.S. spend on repairing mold problems per year?
Okay, so this one's me. I'm going to say it's probably pretty hefty. Like, black mold is in a lot of old buildings, and you can't live with that stuff, so it has to be removed. I'm going to say it's like $1 billion. It might even be a bigger $1 billion industry, like probably like 100 billion, but I'm going to say 1 billion.
Okay, and Techtic?
$1.5 billion.
Yeah, this is $73 billion, so Techtic takes this one. Mold's a big problem, y'all. Mold often a result of water damage, which so you can kind of think about it that way. I think water damage is like responsible for a huge percentage of home insurance claims. But in any case, mold's a big deal, y'all. Be on the lookout for it. So we're tied up. And I just said be on the lookout for mold. What % of homes, according to Harvard, are estimated to contain mold?
Oh, I don't want to know this answer.
You don't want to know this answer.
I don't. I'm going to go, it's a staggering 53%.
Okay. And Nerdbomber?
This is really difficult because I feel like most people hopefully keep up on this, but I feel like it's going to be like 75% or something that makes me really sad and scared inside.
So you're going with 75?
Yes.
You just barely busted. That's a heartbreaker. 70%.
Oh, man.
Is what the estimate is.
That's so
Techtic
terrifying.
takes the point. Yeah, it's not great. I like to think it's in places that we don't know. It's not just like out in front of us, but either way.
I know of secret mold.
Could be mold in your walls.
Can we just hold on?
elsewhere.
Can we just recap on the fact that Techtic just looks at me and says really quietly, I know of secret mold. Where in our house is the secret mold? Please get rid of it.
I'm gonna want to hear about that, but we'll do that offline. Hey, we all have secret mold now and again. Okay, so moving into question 4, it's Techtic with the lead. On average, how many hours does it take for mold to begin to grow?
I thought it was somewhere along the lines of 36 hours.
I feel like those bad boys can grow faster than that. I'm going to say give them 12 hours and they'll sprout little fuzzies.
Nah, it's too short.
It's actually 48 hours. And scientists from the CDC recommend that you wipe down surfaces at least every 48 hours to prevent mold from spreading. I think it's actually wiping down wet surfaces, but I got like a million web
Otherwise,
pages open
the
about mold.
anti-flood industry would be out of business if it was that fast.
But I do believe it is 48 hours. And to finish things out, we have another recommendation. So Techtic is doing a victory lap now. There's only one question left, and he's got 3 points. So sorry to say, Nerdbomber, you flubbed it.
Womp womp.
What percent relative humidity should your home be kept under to avoid mold growth? Of course, moisture is a big deal for mold. So there's a recommended percent relative humidity to keep your home under. Now, I would be good at this one because I actually know what the relative humidity in my house is thanks to my new thermostat.
That's literally what I'm thinking of.
3 light.
What's our relative humidity year round?
My new thermostat got a smart thermostat. I should have added that to my update. That was a fun home improvement project that I frantically messaged Techtic about over the weekend, asking for help. I didn't need his help. I figured it out.
Was I right?
Can't remember what you said, but there
I
was a
will
blown
talk
fuse
offline.
in the furnace control board. That was the problem.
Do I go first?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I'll go first because it doesn't matter. I'm going to say 55% or lower.
Okay, so that's wrong. That is too low. You want to be below 80%.
So Nerdbomber saved some face here. She actually almost got it right on the money. It's 60%. So if your house is any more humid than that, you got secret, as Techtic would call it, secret mold. So
Got to keep them alive somehow. That's why I keep it up at 80.
Be on the lookout for secret mold. Yeah, that's why you're keeping your house at 80% humidity. Jeez, it looks like a sauna in there.
No, we keep our house at 55 in the summer, and then probably in the winter it goes down to like 35 to 40 because my guitar needs to be hydrated.
So
Thirsty boy.
Techtic takes the win, and he can share that proudly with his secret mold offline. And we're all winners here. We've all just enjoyed a wonderful podcast amongst friends talking about tech news, Scarlet Witch news, and mold, of course. So we hope you enjoyed listening. We hope you had a good time with us. And you'll come back along next week. You can go listen to some of our older episodes. You can leave us an Apple Podcast review. You can hit us up on Patreon, Twitter, all the places we mentioned. But whatever you wind up doing, we thank you for being here. And we look forward to talking with you again next week. Have a great night.